Hello everybody, this is Lexi. I hope you all are having a good morning, afternoon, night, whenever you're watching this. This is my historical presentation and it's on Marsha P. Johnson. So first of all, who was she? Marsha P. Johnson was a transgender woman born in 1945. She was a queer activist and a prominent figure during the Stonewall Uprising. She was an HIV and LGBTQ youth advocate, and she was very passionate about particularly helping trans people, as she was trans herself, and trans people and people of color were very much left out of the narrative, even when it came to gay activism and support groups. They were very much left out. So that was also kind of why I wanted to pick Marsha P. Johnson for my presentation, because I think trans people are still very much often left out of the conversation. And Marsha was very much known for her smile and her confidence. She was a very bright and colorful woman, as you can see from this picture, and she was very kind. So, early life. She was born August 24th in 1945 in Elizabeth, New Jersey. She came from a working class family. Her father worked in a factory and her mother was a housekeeper. And by the age of 5, she found that she liked to wear dresses and she had an interest in feminine clothing. But this was very much stopped by her family quickly, because it was 1945 and that type of thing was very much looked down upon and not accepted. And she didn't reveal this until very much later in her life, but she was actually sexually assaulted by a boy when she was a child. She was also, something I found interesting was she was a Christian growing up, and she did stay that way throughout her life, despite all the struggles she went through. So she famously left for New York after graduating with only $15 and a bag of clothes. Her name became Marsha P. Johnson, and the P stood for Pay It No Mind, which was essentially her mantra and what she would say to her adversaries who didn't accept who she was and were upset about it. She was a sex worker for most of her adult life. This is how she had to get by. This is how she had to survive. And she was homeless for most of her adult life as well. She never really had a stable home. She slept on couches and movie theaters and hotels. And she also did drag shows. She identified actually as a drag queen and a transvestite because this was a time before transgender as a term existed. It didn't even exist until she had passed away. She also met Sylvia Rivera when Sylvia Rivera was only 11 years old and was also a sex worker on Christopher Street. And Marsha essentially took her in and they became best friends, and Marsha became her mentor. There is Marsha and Sylvia. And another interesting thing is Sylvia is also a person of color. She is Puerto Rican, so it was very interesting that these two could get together and do what they ended up doing. So, the Stonewall riots. So, in the 1960s, gay acts and essentially the existence of gay people was criminalized. And gay bars and gay clubs became sort of a safe haven for many gay people. But on June 28th, 1969, there was a raid on Stonewall Inn. And what police officers would do was they had this sort of loophole where they would go to places that supposedly didn't have a liquor license and stop what was going on there, although a lot of the times it was just because the place was for gay people. So at Stonewall, patrons and owners were frisked and assaulted, and they were shoved onto the streets by police. But this time, the people and activists, they rebelled. So here's an image of that. So the Stonewall riots went on for 6 days. The clashes between law enforcement and Christopher Street went on for 6 days. So people would throw things and they would chant, and they would sort of do like the kick lines where they would like lock arms and kick their legs. And something interesting is some people remember Marsha P. Johnson like throwing a brick into a police car's window, and what happened there is actually not well documented, so it's kind of hard to tell. And Marsha, in an interview, had said that her and Sylvia did not show up until after the protest had started. So it's kind of interesting because it's not really well documented, and some people remember Marsha being there and being in drag, and others don't remember that. So nonetheless, she was someone that people looked up to. And this uprising was basically a huge catalyst for the LGBTQ movement. And a year after, on the anniversary of Stonewall, it was called Christopher Street Liberation Day, and it essentially became one of the first pride parades in the US.